Properly seconded. No more discussion. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. And it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're on 907.
Consideration of a resolution of the Commission of Knox County, Tennessee, calling for a special election to replace the 8 commissioners and 4 countywide elected officials affected by the Supreme Court ruling.
Okay, intergovernmental.
On a vote of 9-0, we have no recommendation.
Finance Committee.
Finance, by a vote of 8-0, also had no recommendation.
Commissioner Griess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make a motion that this resolution be approved. And I'll speak to it briefly and may reserve some time to come back to questions. But over the last week or so, I've had just an unbelievable number of people calling, wanting a position. Let's just start with those calls. But perhaps an equal number of people who are just basically aghast at the possibility that we might just unilaterally and arbitrarily assign whoever the heck we want to without any consideration from the public. And my suggestion is the best consideration we can give the public is to let them vote on replacement candidates. Now, this is going to take some help from the state. It's nothing the law director has pounded into our head over and over that per our charter, we cannot do it unilaterally. But my motion to call for the special election would have to include asking the state to pass special enabling legislation to let us have an interim special election. And frankly, I don't care if there's a primary or if it's a winner-take-all. Anybody who wants to be considered gets on the ballot, and whoever gets the most votes in each of these categories is it for the interim. That works just fine with me. But I think we do need to pay some respect to the public and their insistence, in my mind, that they would like some input, and to me this is the fairest, most equitable way to do it. That's my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Okay. Commissioner Lambert.
Yes. Can there be some language added to this? We have a meeting called on the 31st, and I do think based on the number of calls that we've been getting that the public certainly is having lots of input into this. Is there any way we could give add some language to this, giving the state a timetable that they react to it so that this does not throw off our meeting on the 31st?
Mr. Law Director, do you want to?
Sure. Now that's up to this body. You can add whatever you wish. From what I hear, Commissioner Griess suggesting is that it contains some language to request our legislative delegation to proceed with special legislation for this one instance to provide for a special election. We will need to add that. And I think what you're asking for is a new private act.
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. And Commissioner Lambert, if this passes, then in my mind there would be no need for a meeting on the 31st. I think it would make it moot.
See, that's what I mean. I'm getting bombarded with calls on this. I think we need to, we need to just do our job and get it over with. And if we send a request to the state, that we need to have some sort of a timetable on that so that this can't be drug on indefinitely.
Well, I suggest to you that that's us telling the state how to do their business is a little bit iffy. And I think our legislative delegation here in Knox County will get the same number or more calls than we've received. And I think they'll understand the urgency of it and the importance of it. And I would expect that they would send us a clear message quickly. We're not going to handle it, or we're going to push this quickly so we can get this election handled. That would be my hope.
Got a lot of lights on, so let's just start. Commissioner Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm one of those who believes that the people should select these replacements rather than the politicians, but I do have a couple of questions. First of all, I understand that the legislature will not go back into session until the 28th, and I may be iffy on that date, but you're looking at next week before they even go into session. I'm not sure how quickly this would go through the legislative process. I'm not sure if it would need to go through the committee process and then have the Senate and the House, or if indeed the legislative delegation of Knox County could get together, make a resolution, and run it through the General Assembly quickly. But a couple of other questions I have, and I see Mr. Greg McKay is here, and if you might indulge me, Mr. McKay, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions with regards to, again, the time frame that we're looking at. Let's say, for example, legislature goes into session and the first part of February they are able to pass a special act which would allow us to have a special election. What time frame then would we be looking at? Would it come back to this body, Mr. Law Director, and we would have to vote on it again to set a date?
Yes.
And then what time frame are we realistically looking at?
For the record, my name is Greg McKay. I'm the Administrator of Elections here in Knox County. Special elections by legislation occur 75 to 80 days after they're called for. And for good reason. That's how long it takes to get the qualifying deadline and get everything ready. So if, let's just say that the state were to pass something on the 7th of February, you'd be looking at a May 1st election, somewhere in that range, assuming you're having a primary and then a general sometime the end of July. We'd have it all done ready to be sworn in by around August 1st.
Would we need to give direction? I'm going back and forth here. Would we need to give direction to the legislature as to whether we would ask for a special election, winner-take-all, or a general election followed by, or a primary followed by a general election?
I would think you would want to give whatever direction you could. The more direction that you give them, the better the legislation is going to be. They're only going to write what it is we request. So be direct.
If we did 2 elections, May would be the primaries, and then how long would it be before you had the general election?
You want to schedule at least 60, 65 days after that for the reason that we don't want to disenfranchise the military vote. We send ballots to our military people 45 days before each election, and you certainly don't want to disenfranchise them.
We're looking at July, basically, or maybe August, theoretically, depending on things.
Yes, sir. Yeah, end of July.
And regardless of what we do here today, there will be an election. Now, when I say will be an election, there could be an election in February to coincide with the presidential primary. That would be up to this body to determine if they wanted to utilize that, but since the state pays for it, it would make sense to do that. So regardless, if we had an election in May and July, there's going to be an election in February regardless. Is that correct?
That's correct, unless the legislature changes.
So we would be looking at folks going to the polls twice in just a matter of months to select these.
Then going back again in February.
In looking at the time frame, and again, I'm one of those who believes that the people need to do this. And looking at the time frame is very iffy, particularly given the fact that the legislature is going to need to act, and we don't really know how the legislature is going to act or how long it's going to act. I guess my bottom line is this. The folks who are going to receive these appointments, if we go through the appointment process, they will not have to conduct any fundraisers. They will not have to knock on any doors. They will not have to put out any yard signs. They will not have to attend any community meetings. They will not have to answer any questions theoretically from the media or any public forums. And I think that the least we could ask is that we have a public and open process where these individuals who want to be considered for this position would at least let their names be known, either through our commission office or some public process, so that the public knows who is interested in these positions. And at that point, submit qualifications if we ask, because I agree with Mr. Lambert. We're getting a lot of phone calls, but I don't think that that's the public process that the public is interested in. I think they want to know who is being considered for these positions. And to me, the very, very least we could ask of them, since they're not going through the campaign process, is let us know and maybe set a deadline. And I know that we can't do that legally, but at least set some kind of timetable to say, if you're interested in these positions, let us know by X number of date. Then make that public, let people know, then they can start giving us informed information as to how they feel about the different candidates. Then we can get together and make our appointments. So I'm still iffy on your resolution, Mr. Griess.
Mr. Hammond, I'm happy to amend my resolution to ask the legislature to make it a one-election, winner-take-all contest. Forget the primaries. That'll speed it up 65 to 70 days, according to Mr. McKay. Is that correct, Mr. McKay? If we have one election instead of 2, we say 70 days.
If you had one, it would be 75 to 80 days after whenever it was called.
As opposed to then a general following a primary. So I'm happy if I'm not for holding this up. I just want the public to make the decision. So I'll amend my motion if the second will agree to that.
Second agrees.
Okay, Commissioner Guda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Realizing that there is a presidential preference